This is RTE News 1601 with Seán Nolan and Aaron Barry. In 1557, Queen Mary passed an Act of Parliament explaining her frustration with the Irish and ordered a plantation for Laois-Offaly. These were named Philipstown and Maryborough. The idea was to rid the lands of the rebellious Gaelic Irish who made Pale residents pay a black rent for safety, but normally broke it and raided it anyway. Then she would replace the driven-out Gaelic Irish with loyal English subjects. There were many rules to the Laois-Offaly plantation. Some of these were: use English farming practices, employ only loyal subjects as servants and labourers, and so on. This just in: Queen Mary has died. Her sister, Elizabeth, has succeeded her as ruler of England, but is currently having her own problems, so she will not be able to focus entirely on the Laois-Offaly plantation. This just in: the Laois-Offaly plantation has failed. The reason why is the English did not want to pay the cost of keeping an army, so the settlers were unprotected. Not enough planters came from England to plant Laois-Offaly, so planters were forced to employ the Gaelic Irish due to this shortage of settlers. And finally, the death of Queen Mary. Her sister, Queen Elizabeth, was too busy keeping power in England to concentrate on the plantation. Queen Elizabeth has ordered the plantation of Munster, and the Fitzgeralds of Desmond are rebelling against her. They are rebelling against her for two reasons. They were loyal Catholics and would not be forced into becoming Protestant, and they had ruled Munster for centuries and were not going to give up their power to London easily. The Fitzgeralds of Desmond were also very irritated by the arrival of adventurers. These adventurers claimed to be direct descendants of the Normans who arrived in Ireland with Strongbow. Elizabeth encouraged these men to take back the land they believed to be rightfully theirs. This upset the Fitzgeralds of Desmond, who owned the land at the time. The most famous adventurer was Elizabeth's favourite adventurer, Sir Walter Raleigh. The Desmond land was divided into 35 estates. These estates were very large, between 5,000 and 10,000 acres, which proved very difficult to manage. The land was granted to loyal subjects of the Queen, such as Sir Walter Raleigh and the writer Edmund Spenser, who became known as undertakers, who undertook or promised to keep the rules of the plantation. These undertakers also had to employ only loyal English subjects, yet this again proved to be impossible, as there were not enough English settlers to employ, and the Gaelic Irish worked for cheaper. Therefore, it was not long before the Gaelic Irish largely repopulated Munster. Over to my correspondent, Aaron Barry.
Hi, I'm Aaron Barry, reporting from the 9th year of what seems to be the end of the war. The Munster plantation was not a complete success, as many Gaelic Irish repopulated Munster greatly soon after the Munster plantation, but it was not a complete failure either, as Queen Elizabeth's successor, King James, learned from the mistakes Elizabeth made. In 1594, the Earl of Tyrone, Hugh O'Neill, led a rebellion which eventually turned into a war which lasted 9 years. The O'Neills and their allies, the O'Donnells of Tyrconnell and the Maguires of Fermanagh, were the last of the powerful Gaelic families. They were determined to maintain independence in their lands of Ulster and to resist Elizabeth's desire to spread the Protestant religion. This eventually became the first successful attempt to rid Ireland of British rule. However, the Irish had little hope of defeating the British without the help of the Spanish. The Spanish were also Catholic, and their king, Philip II, was married to Queen Mary and hated Elizabeth. It is therefore strange that the arrival of a Spanish fleet to help the rebels was a signal for an English victory in the 9 Years' War. When the Spanish arrived in Kinsale, Cork, Lord Mountjoy's army met them before the Irish did and smashed the Spanish troops on Christmas Eve 1601. Mountjoy turned his army to face the exhausted rebel army, and they were also defeated, even though O'Neill and most of the other Gaelic Irish leaders managed to escape. The war dragged on for 2 more years, but in 1603 O'Neill was finally forced to surrender. The agreement that ended the war was called the Treaty of Mellifont. Under its terms, O'Neill was allowed to keep his lands as long as he agreed to accept English control in Ireland. English power in Ireland was now total. O'Neill and the rest of the Gaelic lords were fed up with living under English rule, so they fled from Ireland to Rome in 1607. This became known as the Flight of the Earls. Hey.